In the 1600s, the Spanish conquered the Aztecs. We know they had a lot of gold, but where did it go? We're doing the lost treasure of Montezuma today on MKUSUAL. All right, buddy, I found an infinite money glitch. Figured out how we're going to pay our rent.
Catalytic converters.
It's one step. All we have to do is find the lost gold of the Aztecs.
That's pretty straightforward.
Pretty straightforward, dude.
You know what else? We should find the gold that was in the World Trade Center towers. Where did that go?
Oh, this is going to be a goofy week, and I like it. Have you ever heard of the lost gold of the Aztecs? It almost certainly exists.
No.
This isn't one of those city made of gold. This is something that should exist.
They were sitting on a stockpile.
Well, they were like one of the richest, most expansive empires, like maybe in this continent. So it's a little history lesson. When the Spanish conquistadors, led by Hernan Cortez, hero or villain, drop a comment below, arrived in the Aztec Empire in 1519, the Aztec Emperor Montezuma II welcomed them, believing they were gods. However, within 2 years, the Aztec Empire was overthrown. During the Spanish conquest, it's said that Montezuma, fearing the Spanish would take his treasures, ordered his gold and other valuables to be hidden. The legend of this lost treasure has fascinated historians, treasure hunters, and conspiracy theorists for centuries. So the question is, did they have this massive treasure? If so, where is it?
Couldn't have got far.
If you ever read much about the Aztec Empire, didn't we look this up once? They were a conquer-based society. Their economy.
Yes.
We were looking up the economy. We should do a video on all the different types of economies of like ancient.
Yeah.
But they were just straight up, like the way they grew through Mesoamerica was they would just take all your stuff. And we know there's gold because one of the first things Columbus did when he hit the New World was he had the natives like collecting gold for him. So the way they worked was they take all your money, all your people, all your women, all your oxen, or whatever the hell they had down there, and they'd move you to Tenochtitlan. We know they were mega rich. And also we have weird clues that we're going to get into. Let me give you a little more background. Okay.
Is this like the city of Coronado? Did it turn into a myth? Did the city of Coronado, was it based on this and kind of became myth? Like the city of gold.
Was that El Dorado?
Maybe it was.
So the city of El Dorado
Is that okay?
was a myth by the Muisca people, also conquered, but they're in Colombia.
Okay.
And they have a legend of the myth of gold. But that's a very interesting question, though. Like, could the Aztecs have been this big, scary, rich place? Is where this... I'm going to opine. I think sometimes myths and legends are like way more simple than you'd think. But once we classify it in a certain way...
Yeah, it kind of... I see what you're saying.
You know, like the sea people, we'll probably do a show on the sea people. Those are probably just the other people that existed around that time, and they probably had to cross a lake or some shit. Okay, way too much opining. Yeah, El Dorado means gilded man or golden one.
I heard that, like, it ended up, the search went all the way through Kansas.
Oh, yeah, we're going to get into up through here.
Okay.
For El Dorado?
Yes.
Yeah, we have El Dorado, Kansas, too.
Yeah, but that...
Shout out to my ex-fiance.
The story was...
Hope you're doing well.
The story I heard was that, like, they got here and it was actually, like, the sun reflecting on the wheat or, like, this Kansas sunset.
They're like,
was
well, that
so beautiful.
sucks. Oh, man.
I don't know.
You come here all the way this way looking for gold, and you're like, all we found was
You're
wheat.
like, there it is. I don't know. Anyway.
You ever look up a picture? I'll drop a picture of Montezuma here. That dude was gilded out, dressing super nice.
Drip.
I mean, he looks like a pharaoh or something. That's a whole other issue. The whole connection between Egypt and South America.
Yeah.
So let me get back into the background. We're dealing with the fall of the Aztec Empire, which happened between 1519 and 1521.
I always forget it was that recent. I always imagine it's older than that, but that's pretty new.
What do you mean?
The fall. When I think of the Aztecs, I forget that the Spanish were the ones who, you know what I'm saying. I just like.
Oh yeah.
In part of my brain, it's like way older.
That's less than 30 years after Columbus arrived.
Yeah. To me, that's crazy.
That is crazy. What was 30 years ago? 1995?
Dude.
It's the rise and fall of the Walkman or something. It's the rise and fall of the Game Boy. The Aztec Empire was founded approximately 1325. So you think of them as like super ancient.
So they did all that in 200 years.
They had their whole rise and their whole fall.
What have we done in 200 years?
I mean, 200 years ago would have been 1825. Yeah. I mean, I guess we went to the moon.
Yeah, that's true. But I'm just saying, like, I want some monuments made out of marble or something, you know?
Oh, that will last forever?
Yeah.
I wonder if, like, okay, so, but I mean, people think of the Aztecs as being like super ancient. Not really. I mean, they were around for less than America. I'm with you, though, buddy.
Let's get into the history.
Okay, so they were at their height. They were at their peak when Cortez arrived, controlling vast region of modern-day Mexico. The empire had a large treasury of gold, silver, and precious stones. Montezuma was believed to have amassed a huge collection of gold for religious rituals and as tribute from subjugated people. That's how their world ran.
Tribute. LOL.
So during the siege of Tenochtitlan, Cortez and his men began to plunder the empire. But Montezuma allegedly tried to appease them with gold gifts. As the tension grew, the Spanish began to demand more. Here's some theories on how the treasure was hidden. Before the Spanish took full control, there are several accounts suggesting that Montezuma attempted to hide his treasure. One of the most prominent theories is that he ordered the gold to be hidden in the mountains or lakes surrounding the capital. And by the way, Tenochtitlan sits right underneath modern-day Mexico City.
Oh.
I did not know that. I think that's kind of cool, though. And they have the whole Aztec symbol on their flag.
Yeah.
Some accounts suggest the treasure was moved down to the coast to the Gulf of Mexico, or hidden in caves, or on nearby islands. Some believe it was dispersed among loyal Aztec tribes who took it with them after fleeing the city. Some believe it would be worth over $3 billion today, and is hidden either in the southwestern United States or Mexico. Okay, so let's talk about some attempts to find the gold. The first attempts. In the years following the conquest, treasure hunters and explorers began searching for the treasure. One of the earliest expeditions, led by Cortez himself, he's like, "Where'd that gold at?" sought to recover any hidden gold, but the treasure was never found. He knew it was found because this guy was giving him gold. Over the centuries, numerous treasure hunters have embarked on expeditions to find it. Notably, in the 20th century, treasure hunter Francisco Villa claimed to have found parts of the treasure in Mexico's mountains. However, no significant treasure has ever been recovered. Popular locations tied to the legend of Montezuma's treasure include a lake, a mountain, and even the old city of Tenochtitlan itself, meaning it would just be buried under Mexico City.
You'd think now with like LiDAR, they might be able to find it if it's all in one place.
This one's interesting to me because there's a lot of treasure myths where, you know, we're eventually going to do one on the Confederates' lost gold.
Okay.
But money gets moved around, stuff happens. Sometimes, you know, it's not as much money as people say. This one is almost certain just because of the state of the empire, how powerful they were and the way their economy worked and the way that they would just be hoarding this stuff.
The Spanish would have had records of...
The Spanish would have witnessed this, and then that's why he was trying to pay them off.
Yeah.
It's a gold-based economy. Some historians point to written accounts from early Spanish explorers like Bernal Diaz de Castillo, who chronicled the Spanish conquest. He mentions vast amounts of gold, though it's unclear whether the gold ever reached Cortez or was hidden beforehand. Some sources suggest that during the retreat from Tenochtitlan, Montezuma and his followers were killed by Spanish forces. Afterward, the Spanish soldiers would have taken the treasure they could find, but the main hoards were never discovered. Many scholars believe the treasure was either moved or buried. Others think it was destroyed during the Spanish occupation. I wonder if they would just destroy it. Here's a story. One story tells of the 1520 imprisonment of Montezuma II by Spanish conquistadors, with the conquistadors demanding a ransom in gold. Runners were dispatched to warn tribes to hide their treasures. However, none of the histories of the conquest, such as the true history of the conquest of New Spain, say that Montezuma was ever held for ransom. And by the way, that was written by Diaz de Castillo. And it also doesn't list that people were told to hide treasure, but that would be from the Spanish perspective.
Sure.
A labyrinth found in modern times at the Casa Grande Ruins National Monument led to speculation that it might be home to some of the fabled treasure. Extensive excavation of the area, however, has turned up nothing so far. So, one gold bar has been found. At least. And this has been confirmed by scientists in 2020. It's found by a guy. It's found by a man. So this gold bar was found in the 80s in Mexico. And then they have used scientific advancements to confirm that it is from the Aztec Empire. But the treasure is also told to include gold bars, silver, precious stones, other artifacts, again, worth $3 billion. In 1976, Mexican fisherman Raul Hurtado was searching for octopus at Punta Gorda, north of Veracruz City, when he discovered something totally unexpected amongst the rocks and sand: Aztec gold jewelry. A team of underwater archaeologists from Mexico's National Institute of Anthropology and History and the University of Veracruz spent 2 frustrating and fruitless weeks fighting bad weather, very poor visibility, sharks, and generally hazardous conditions while searching for additional pieces of the treasure. Despite Hurtado's assistance, they only recovered a few colonial period potsherds and amorphous lumps of non-important metals. This tells me they might have just dumped it in the water.
It's so crazy to think about what they were thinking when the Spanish, because they like believed they were gods.
And it would have been the end of the world. That would have been the end of the world.
Yeah.
The gods have come to, but you'd think they would have figured out they weren't gods when they started killing everybody. I would think that somebody higher up, I would think like Montezuma himself would have got the picture. You know, there's all these legends about like, oh, they didn't even know it was a boat. They thought it was a giant creature on the sea, and only the wise men could see it. It's like, part of me is like, man, there's no way. You can't be like this ruthless empire leader and not figure out at a certain point, like, these are just people and they are coming for my gold. Just probably why he started paying them off. It's not like he was like sacrificing people to them. The Aztec, despite initial awe, soon began to fight against the Spaniards, indicating the idea of the Spanish as gods did not prevent conflict. The higher ups figured it out. They were like, there's no way. I don't give a shit what you're wearing. Okay, so according to John Mitchell, in 1847, during the Mexican-American War, a Mexican aristocrat named Don Joaquin enslaved the local Apaches to dig up gold from the Sierra Estrellas. But later, as the United States Army entered the mountains, the Apache rose up against the Mexicans, who had to hide their gold in a canyon near Montezuma's head. Most of the Mexicans were killed, but at least one man survived, later went back to the mountains in the 1880s with a treasure map to find the gold. However, the Apaches still controlled the area, and the Mexican man was never found his treasure. And newspapers as far back as 1895 have published accounts of people who have claimed to have found the lost treasure. Here's the other thing. Okay, let's say indigenous communities were warned. He sent out these runners. So they would have witnessed it. So it could have been hidden in multiple places.
Yes.
So there's this guy named Freddy Crystal, which just seems like a drag queen name. I don't know. So Freddy Crystal was a Utah prospector who had some reason to believe it was in that Utah area. This is from angelfire.com. Freddy Crystal was a prospector who had very little luck in actual prospecting. However, when he showed up in Kanab, Utah in 1914, looking for a grub stake, he had returned from Mexico with a drawing of some Aztec petroglyphs, which I will drop right here. This might be the treasure map. Boys, go to work. Which he was able to find, which would lead him to Montezuma's treasure. He found a well-to-do rancher named Oscar Robinson. He told Robinson a tale of the infamous treasure, which at the time would be $10 million worth of gold bars, shields, plates, and pendants lined with emeralds, rubies. Crystal searched every inch of the canyon in the prospective area for months. He eventually found the petroglyph in Johnson's Canyon. It was a perfect match with his drawing to a T. He searched and searched the canyon slopes for 2 years without result, after which he just seemed to vanish. Nobody saw him again for 4 years until he returned and knocked on Mr. Robinson's door. He didn't have much to say, but the story that he did tell was a great one. The story is that he was in Mexico City, and during this time period, in an old Mexican monastery, which was being demolished and the contents removed to make way for new construction. The way that Freddy describes the situation was that it was one in which anybody could simply walk in, to the unguarded, partially demolished building and pretty much take anything that struck your fancy. So it was that he was leafing through some very old manuscripts that he claimed dated to the time of Hernan Cortez and had been written by one of the many friars that were around in the time period. While turning the pages of the old manuscript, in the story, Freddy relates that the manuscript appears to have been written on bark. An old parchment fell out and onto the ground. Stooping down to retrieve the parchment, Freddy noticed that it was a map. Upon closer inspection, Freddy was surprised to realize that the geography depicted on the map was very similar to that of southern Utah. Or rather, one place in particular that was on the outskirts of a little town named Kanab. After some additional research, Freddy was convinced that it was a map of the possible location of Montezuma's treasure. The particular friar who'd written the manuscript that Freddy had been leafing through was relating the torturing of Aztecs that was undertaken by Cortez and his men, so that verifies that story, in an effort to discover the hidden location of the treasure of Tenochtitlan. As we know, Cortez eventually conquers and seizes control of the capital of the Aztec nation, but discovers the absence of a great bulk of treasure that had initially been there, but was removed or secreted in different locations. In desperation, Cortez allowed for the torturing of anybody who thought they might help them discover the new location of the treasure. As the story goes, the most that was ever uncovered by torturing these people was that the treasure had been taken north and hidden at the bottom of a lake. He would then search approximately 5,000 lakes in the surrounding region, but with no modern technology. After reading several pages of the manuscript, including the pages which the map had originally been tucked into, Freddy reached the conclusion that his particular map had been drawn by the friar, and it was related to him by one of the original porters of the treasure during his torture. Apparently, the friar had drawn the map based on the description given by the porter and subsequently tucked it into the manuscript and forgot about it. So Freddy rediscovered the map, and with great excitement on his part, went back to Utah. With the map in hand, Freddy began an intensive search of the area, but southern Utah is full of similar geographical landmarks and canyons that look identical to each other, so it took Freddy a while to actually pinpoint the area indicated on the map. This is incredibly, however, on the last Sunday, November 1922, after 2 years, Freddy actually found the location based on the description given on the map. While atop Sheep Mountain, he pulled out his map, then looked around at the surrounding sandstone hills. Shortly after, shouting could be heard through the canyon for miles. The main canyon with the side draws, 7 mountains, each in its proper order. Crystal had found Montezuma's treasure, or had he? He scampered down the mountain and ran over to the site. After about 10 anxious minutes, he found steps that were carved into the mountain. He quickly climbed the steps, and at the end he found what appeared to be a false wall on the cliff face. Freddy broke down the false wall, and behind it lay the entrance to a long, dark corridor. On both sides of the corridor were statues believed to have been placed there to protect the entrance. And a few feet within the corridor was an old pair of leather sandals that had almost completely rotted away. Both the sandals and the statues appeared to be of ancient origin, and Freddy figured that he'd finally hit the jackpot. Although a quick investigation revealed the corridor went back a short ways and ended at a rock wall, which appeared to be another false wall. With his newfound evidence, Freddy returned to Kebab, began telling people about his discovery. The majority of Canabites believed Freddy, and eventually a coalition was organized by the town council in which people could volunteer a certain number of hours per week dedicated to the excavation of the treasure area. Hundreds of people volunteered from the chance to participate in the great treasure hunt. Many people dedicated their Saturdays to helping the excavation in the area. At some point, 75% of the population was helping to recover the treasure. So Freddy, along with the people of Kanab, continued to search the area for 2 to 3 years, and in the process broke down innumerable false walls, discovered lots of different rooms that would lead to yet more corridors and rooms. As the months went by, more and more people lost interest, stopped volunteering at the work site, and eventually Freddy was left with only a few people who still believed something could be found. At this point, Freddy came to the conclusion that he had been following a false trail and that the real entrance lay at the base of the canyon rather than further up along its rim. Unfortunately, the tailings of the excavation had been dumped there. And over the months and years, the piling of tailings had turned into a small mountain that would prove difficult to move. So he further buried the treasure.
Oh, man. That's genius, though.
Oh, that is genius.
That they would do that.
He's convinced the real treasure lay underneath the tailings, so they commenced removing them. And they spent after they spent 3 years accumulating. In the end, the only thing that was ever found were the original statues, sandals, and various booby traps that were set by the builders.
Dude, if they had a giant boulder in here that chased you out of the tunnel, that'd be legendary.
That would. So he got disgruntled, left. Nobody knows whatever happened to him, and to this day, the mountain of tailings has never been completely hauled away. So there's still this little mini mountain there, dude. I'm telling you,
And the cave system.
infinite money glitch. What's crazy to me is that they verify. Okay, you could just say this guy's crazy and making shit up, but they found the statues and the sandals and the booby traps and the caverns,
False walls, yeah, everything.
So, bro,
I wonder if there's like, can you take a tour, or is this something you have to like go risk your life on your own to do?
let's see if you can
Like
do a
currently,
Sheep Mountain, Utah. They do helicopter tours. Do you think we can find, okay, Sheep Mountain, Utah, Google Maps. Let's see if we can see the heap. I bet there's so many people who have gone out there to find this.
yeah, it's probably just littered with like fucking Gatorade bottles and yogurt containers and shit.
So here it is. That's the mountain. That might be our answer, bro.
We seen it first.
We called it first.
I seen it.
Dude, I'm convinced. At least some of it is at Sheep Mountain.
This is interesting.
All right, any final? This is more of a straight up.
If I
story.
disappear for 4 years, you'll be able to find me probably in Kanab, Utah.
I can't believe nobody has
Just a man and his pickaxe.
just a man and his shovel. Dude, you'd have to undo 3 years of work by a bunch of dedicated Mormons. That's
Dude.
rough.
Yeah, they had nothing else to do, so there's probably a big ass pile.
Welp, hit us up with your theories. If you want to head out to Utah with us, I've kind of always wanted to have 6 wives.
You just have to promise them a mountain of gold that you will find. You can have infinite wives.
Stuff just really used to be that way.
Well, fuck, that guy dedicated his life to trying to find it. And
I like how he got frustrated and disappeared.
well, he disappeared once and then came back, and he's like, I can't do this. I've been living by this lake, obsessing, and now I have to come back.
Well, that's the story.
The gold's out there.
Gold's out there, baby. Don't let your memes be dreams.
We love you.